Hello, my wonderful friends. Welcome back to Traffic Jam Podcast. I'm Cam, and I realize that I say this every week, that I am so excited for today's episode. I say that every time, but it's because I actually am. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about menstrual cycles, hormone health, some basics, but mostly things that I've learned or things that I didn't know that I wish I knew. Before jumping into that, I have to tell you guys about this week, what's been going on. Pretty much the highlight. I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about, what my highlight of this week was, until last night when I went to volleyball again. I talked about this last week in my episode with Issa, that pretty much almost every Wednesday night, Adam and I go to our church building and a bunch of our friends meet there on Wednesday night and we play volleyball together. And so there's a pretty solid group now of people that go every week, and because of the practice and the consistency, everyone's getting pretty good, which is fun to see. And we have a lot of people that are super competitive, of course, and it's really exciting to play. And so every week it seems like we play a little bit longer and a little bit longer. So last night we played for like 2.5 hours, and it was definitely my best night. You guys, I gotta tell you, I am sure I have mentioned before that before I discovered dance and my passion for dance and that kind of natural ability, I was terrible at like every sport. Like I tried soccer, basketball, volleyball, tennis, you name it. I tried all the sports because I wanted to find one that I was so good at, but I was so bad at all of them. And I'm pretty sure now, like looking back, if I would have taken more time to get better, maybe I would have been better at them. But the moral of the story is that I was just really bad. And in middle school, I wanted to play volleyball. I was like, okay, maybe volleyball's my thing. So I tried out for the volleyball team, and I was like one of 3 people that didn't make any of the teams because I was that bad. Okay, so that is my only memory of volleyball and experience that I have with volleyball. So when we first started playing, when we got invited to play with this group of friends, I was really nervous because I was like, all I remember about volleyball is that I'm terrible. But I kept going and I kept practicing, and it started to become really fun for me. And last night I hit 5 overhand serves in a row without missing, without hitting the net. They went over exactly where I wanted them to, and that was a huge accomplishment for me. So that was a big thing. But also, we play in the gym and set up the net there, and the basketball hoops on either side of the gym are down. Like, we don't move them up out of the way because they usually don't get in the way. But we always joke and say if anyone ever makes it into the hoop and ever hits a volleyball into one of the basketball hoops, then they win the whole game, and that's it. Everyone's done. And last night it finally happened, and I gotta say, I'm pretty happy to announce that I'm the one that hit it into the hoop. I was on the opposite side of the hoop, and someone passed it to me. I bumped it to hit it over the net, and I somehow bumped it over the net and towards the basketball hoop, and just a perfect swish right in the hoop. And everyone just freaked out. Everyone was jumping up and down. They threw the ball back to me. Someone was turning off and on the light, so it was like a disco. Everyone was just screaming and celebrating. They're like, we never thought that was actually gonna happen. Oh my gosh. Everyone was just celebrating. Oh, the celebration was almost better than actually making it into the hoop. But, I wish that all of you guys were there so you could have seen how epic it was. But hopefully you can get a little glimpse. Hopefully you can picture it. Anyway, that was definitely a highlight of my week. What else? I would say, another highlight is that we got to go meet one of our friends' dog, and she was even cuter than I thought she was going to be. We were so excited to meet her because she's the kind of dog that we're looking at. Adam and I, well, yeah, I really want to get a dog, and Adam really wants to get a dog too, but he is a lot better at being patient than I am, because I would just go get one today and bring it home. But because we're in the process of moving soon, it's not like ideally the best time, right? But I am just not good at being patient, and so we have been looking, but we're not going to get one for a little bit. Anyway, we went to this friend's house to go meet their dog because it's the kind of dog that we're looking for and the kind that we want. And that was really fun too, to get to like play with her and stuff. So anyway, hopefully more exciting news about that coming in the future. Okay, my traffic jam of the week this week is just a thought, just something random that I was thinking about. Those pokey things in the grass, or anything really pokey in the grass, or goat heads, are so annoying. That's just my annoying thing that I thought of. I love walking around inside or outside barefoot, but especially outside, I'm always scared of stepping on something sharp. And then whenever that does happen, which is not like very often, but whenever that does happen, it like reinforces my fear of stepping on something sharp in the grass or outside. And that's just annoying to me. So, do what you will with that, but I know I'm surely not the only one that feels that way. Moving on to our topic for today, menstrual cycles. Menstrual cycles are cool. That is the vibe that we are giving off today. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a couple different things. So first I'll talk about like my birth control experience. Then I'll talk about cycle phases, just like an overview of that and what I've learned there. And then also I'll talk about tracking your cycle, and that's about it. I'd say those are like the three main things. So birth control, cycle phases, and then tracking your cycle. And this, like I said, this is just like an overview and things that I have learned, and also just basic things that I kind of wish I knew before now. And hopefully this is helpful if there are people that maybe are on birth control, wondering if they should stay on. Maybe you're someone who is not on birth control, but you're trying to decide if you want to do it. Maybe you're someone who wants to learn more about their cycle, or maybe try to regulate your periods or like your hormones more naturally. Things like that. So if that's you, or if it's not, but if that's you, this episode is a good starting place. First, I'll talk about birth control. I didn't know, I wasn't really familiar with all of the different kinds of birth control that there are. Really, the way that I learned about a few of the different kinds was through asking friends. So the reason that I got on birth control was to prevent pregnancy when I got married, and I just wasn't sure where to start, but I just thought that was the thing that you do. I just thought that was the easiest, simplest, most straightforward way to not get pregnant. And I asked a couple friends just what they used or what their experiences were, because I didn't even know what there was, and got I had some friends who did the pill. I had some friends who I knew someone that got a shot in their arm or something like that. Someone who got the little wire thing in their arm. Some people had IUDs, and then someone had a NuvaRing. So after hearing mixed things about all of those, pretty much, I just went for an appointment, talked to a doctor, and said, hey, I think NuvaRing would be a good option. This sounds like something that would maybe be the best for me. So I'll maybe I want to try this out. And she pretty much was just like, okay, sounds good. Like, I'm just going to write you a prescription. Didn't like really talk to me about other options. She was like, yeah, you can do that, or you can do the pill, or you can do an IUD. But yeah, this would probably be fine for you. So do that. And that was pretty much all. And I didn't really have any issues with it until a couple months down the road, I think. I started birth control around when COVID started, like a month or two before. And then I was on it for like a year and a half, I think. So not super long, but probably long enough for me. My biggest symptom was nausea, which it was just, I mean, it got really bad for a little bit. It got better for a while, and then it got bad again. And so I probably noticed it maybe like 4 or 5, like maybe like 4 months into starting. And mostly it was like in the evenings, but sometimes it would just come out of nowhere, like just a wave of nausea, and I would feel like I was going to throw up, and it wouldn't go away unless I like took a nap or went to bed for the night, and then I would wake up the next day and feel fine. But a lot of times it was in the evenings around dinner time, and I would eat, and then around before or after I would eat, and I would just feel so terrible. Like I just felt like I was going to throw up, and it would stay that way all night. So after that happening for a while, like I went to a couple doctors, and birth control never was like brought up as the reason why this was happening. And so I just kind of brushed it off and didn't really think of that. And I actually would take Dramamine sometimes to help, and that would actually relieve the nausea. I wouldn't take it super often, and I didn't want to have to take it all the time, but that was really the only thing that would fix it. So that was a big thing. And then also mood, like very more extreme mood swings than normal, and not just in certain times of my cycle. Like it was random and just a lot more extreme than what I was used to. And I hadn't ever experienced anxiety the way that I had after starting birth control. And I think that there were a couple of different factors there that contributed to that, I guess, because like I said, when I started birth control was around the time that COVID started also. And so I think that a combination of birth control and the shutdown, whatever you want to call it, and other life things really triggered my anxious thoughts, and I struggled a lot with panicking and panic attacks and things that I had never experienced before, at least to that level. And I maybe had thoughts like that here or there before, like growing up, but I wouldn't say that growing up I experienced a lot of anxiety, or at least didn't realize that that's what it was. So that was something that I hadn't ever dealt with before birth control. And I think that birth control definitely heightened it and made it a lot more difficult to deal with. So like I said, I stayed on it for a year and a half, and we moved here to Northern Virginia, and I was still struggling with all of these things, with nausea, with feeling really anxious, other mental health things. And it got to the point where Adam actually brought it up, and he was like, I think you should look into maybe not being on this anymore, because I can see that it's really affecting you. And I just didn't really take the idea seriously that it could be because of birth control. I had thought that a couple times, but I had gotten it brushed off more than once and stopped thinking that birth control was the reason that I was having these problems. until Adam brought that to my attention, or he was saying that he was worried about it. And I thought, okay, I need to really take time to do a lot of research about this and decide if I need to go ahead and stop. So I read a lot of books. I actually came across a hormone specialist / integrative health practitioner. Her name's Maddie Miles. I actually found her on Instagram, I believe. She has a podcast too. I listened to all her podcast episodes about hormone health and getting in tune with your cycle, I guess, and then like the effects of birth control, how that changes your body. And I read some books too. I read Beyond the Pill, I read In the Flow, and Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And all of these books just gave really good information about the basic things of your cycle phases, how your hormones work during different phases of your cycle, and then what birth control does and how it works, pretty much like the physiology of it and how it affects your body. So learning all of that was really helpful and eye-opening, and I decided to stop birth control, and I'm really glad that I did. Now it's been a year, and there are some times where I feel like my body is still recovering, but there are definitely things that I've continued to learn as far as syncing up with your cycle and tracking your cycle and eating for your cycle that have helped me to be a little more balanced, I guess, and feel better. My point in all of that is not to deter you from using birth control. I think everyone should do their own research. You know your body best. I've also heard that there are people that don't have symptoms and birth control doesn't bother them. They don't have any problem with it. I've also heard people that have a variety of other symptoms or issues that they've had with it that are totally different than mine. But that makes sense because every body is different. Every body reacts to things differently. So do your own research. But this is just to kind of explain my experience with it and the tools that I've used to learn more about my body and what it does. And it's pretty cool. Let's talk about a quick rundown of the cycle phases. So in case you didn't know, your menstrual cycle is not just bleeding. It includes a whole month-ish long cycle that your body is going through while you bleed, and then everything that happens after and before too. So it's anywhere from like 21 to 36, 38-ish days of a woman's hormone cycle. So that range is not set. So every woman's cycle is different. Generally, it should be about the same every month. Like it should be a consistent length every cycle. But to figure this out, you will have to track your own cycle for a continuous amount of time, say like 3 to 6 months. You would want to keep track of your cycle and see how long or how many days each one is and when different things happen in your cycle to get to know it better, because seriously, everyone's is so different. The first day that you bleed is the first day of a new cycle. So this is your menstrual phase. It's 3 to 7 days of bleeding. This is when your energy is pretty low. All your hormones are at their lowest. And so if you don't feel up for heavy exercise and like running or HIIT workouts or strength workouts, if you're not feeling up for that, that totally makes sense because all your hormones and your energy are at their lowest. And so when you are wanting to do movement for your bodies, you really want to do restorative exercise like yoga or walks. This is also the time in your cycle where you'll probably want to eat more warm and grounding foods. And all of these things together help support your body and your hormones where they're at. So all of those things that I just mentioned, those are ways to support the menstrual phase of your cycle. So the menstrual is the first phase. The second phase is follicular. And this phase includes your menstrual phase. And then it's also, once you're done bleeding, follicular is also the what you call the phase up until the time of ovulation. So follicular phase, your energy is starting to increase. You're probably feeling more productive, and this is because estrogen in your body is starting to rise. Ovulation is usually, I don't even want to say a certain time, but maybe like 2 weeks after your menstrual phase. So it's usually about the middle of your cycle, and you have 1 day of peak ovulation, and you have your most natural energy at this phase. So this is because estrogen peaks at ovulation. This is in the middle of your cycle, and testosterone and progesterone, those are other hormones, those are rising. So high intensity workouts feel better at this phase because you are having more energy. This is probably the most energized that you'll feel in your whole 21 to 36 day cycle. The last phase of your cycle is the luteal phase, and this is from the time that ovulation is done to when you start to bleed again. So your energy is starting to decline in the luteal phase. It's usually about 2 weeks long. The first week of your luteal phase, you feel more energetic. And then in the second week, your energy starts to go down as you're getting closer to your menstrual phase. So in the first week, you probably would still have energy to do higher intensity workouts. But in the second week, that is when you'll probably start to feel more like you want to do Pilates or yoga. And all of this, like the energy, the amounts of energy that you have, and feeling like you, feeling like different workouts feel good or don't feel good at different phases. I had no idea that was connected, but that totally makes sense that when your hormones in your body change, that changes your energy levels. And so if you feel more tired and you aren't wanting to go on a run, that's totally normal, and that's your body telling you like how much energy you have and how you're feeling. So, the other thing about the luteal phase is that your progesterone is most dominant in this phase, and so you're more aware of what's going on, but also you're feeling less social. Pretty cool. Going back to ovulation is, like I said, there's a peak day. This is really what you want to keep track of or watch the most closely when you're trying to get pregnant, or also when you're trying to avoid getting pregnant. I'll talk about the ways that you can track your cycle in just a second, but basically there's a peak day of ovulation, but about a range of like 6 days around that time where you are fertile and you can actually get pregnant. I thought this is all really cool and really good, helpful information to have. I wasn't super familiar with the cycles and what happens at each of them and the days that you're fertile and things like that until I listened to the podcast from Maddie Miles and learned about the phases and learned about fertility in the books that I mentioned. So I was really excited to learn about these things, and learning about them just made me want to find out more. Right now, the way that I track my cycle is on an app, and I just log how I'm feeling and some different things on the app every day that I'm able to go in, and I can see like what day I'm at in my cycle. I can see what moods or like symptoms that I'm having during the day and see where that kind of matches up to previous cycles. I learned that when you're not on birth control, you can use a method that is really cool. I think it's super interesting, called the fertility awareness method. And it's pretty much tracking your own cycle so that you know where you're at and you know when you're fertile. So like I said before, it takes time to get to know your body and know what's normal for you. But once you know, you can practice the fertility awareness method to prevent pregnancy or try to get pregnant. And I like this because you're using your knowledge of your own body to decide and to track. And I think that's really empowering. Also, you can support your cycle and your hormones with certain foods and exercises, which is just so cool. So to track, you can use an app. You can print out a calendar and keep an actual physical calendar to mark off and write how you're feeling that day. I know there are other methods out there, but I'm specifically going to talk about the fertility awareness method just for now because that's what I am learning about. So there are 3 things that you can use, 3 like body cues that you can use to help determine where you're at in your cycle. So of course, when you are bleeding, you want to note those days in your calendar and just remember that the first day that you bleed is the first day of a new cycle. And then the 3 body cues that you can use to track your own cycle are basal body temperature, cervical fluid, and cervical position. The first 2 are the main ones that you use, and the third, the cervical position, I won't really talk about that because I don't do that, and that's kind of a more optional one. It can be helpful and interesting. It just gives you more information. But basal body temperature, pretty much you have a thermometer, and as soon as you wake up in the morning, you take your temperature in your mouth. You want to write down the temperature that you get as soon as you wake up, and you want to record this every day. And it's so crazy. Like if you look basal body temperature charts up and you look at how your temperature fluctuates throughout your cycle, it is so fascinating. Like it's just crazy that your body can give you this information. Pretty much your body will be around the same temperature for all of your menstrual phase and your follicular phase. And then whenever you see a spike in the temperature, it will spike, and then that number will be up around that higher number and stay up at that higher temperature until it goes back down when you start bleeding again. Hopefully that makes sense. It's hard to explain without like a chart. But basically when that temperature spikes and it stays up higher, that means that you have just ovulated. Cervical fluid is another way that you can track your cycle. And with this, you pretty much just check what it sounds like. Like when you go to the bathroom, when you wipe, you can check with your fingers and you just check and see any discharge that you have. And based on like the color, the texture, the look of your cervical fluid, it will tell you where you are in your cycle as well. So if you didn't know, discharge is normal. I just didn't like know anything about it. I didn't know if it was normal, if it wasn't, what it was supposed to look like, why this was happening. It's so crazy. But pretty much the pH or your environment there will change throughout the phases of your cycle. And because there are different phases, different kinds of cervical fluid are meant to support creating a baby or not. And if you have discharge that looks like egg white consistency, then that is around the time that you're ovulating. Isn't that so crazy? I just think that is so cool and so interesting. Hopefully this is helpful and interesting to you too. If you want to learn more information about like the fertility awareness method, or more in depth about tracking your cycle, then you should definitely listen to that girl's podcast that I was talking about earlier, Maddie Miles. Her podcast is called Peace, Love, Hormones. And like I said before, she just has really good information, and that's what she does for a living. So definitely go check that out if that's something that you're interested in. That really helped me be more aware of what was going on in my body. The moral of the story is that menstrual cycles, female cycles, so cool. And there is so much more to learn about it. And I just think it's super important to know yourself, to be familiar with how your body works, and be educated about cycles, your hormones, and everything, so that you can make the best decisions to support your body and feel your best. If you'd be interested in another episode like this, or maybe more in depth about one of these topics, I would love to talk more about this. So definitely let me know. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Traffic Jam with Cam. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave me a rating and a review so that the podcast can reach more people. I post new episodes on Monday mornings, and you can find me on Instagram at Traffic Jam Podcast. Talk to you next time. Bye.